The Galactic Observation Chamber was built for calm analysis, not fear, yet silencer now felt brittle as glass. Ambassador Kelt of the Virile leaned forward, his frilled crest dimming as the live feed from Earth stabilized. The image showed a human dwelling, small and unarmored, its walls thin enough to register individual heat signatures. One human sat cross-legged on the floor, unprotected, unaware of the eyes watching from 1,000 stars away. For the Council, this should have been mundane. Then the warning glyphs ignited. A red lattice wrapped the feed as the system identified a Class 5 apex predator inside the habitat. Muscle density, reaction speed, cranial structure. Every metric screamed lethal efficiency. Kelt's secondary heart stuttered. No sapient species allowed such a creature, within intimate distance, without restraints. He opened his mandibles to order a feed termination. The human looked up. From the shadows emerged a predator, compact and fluid, for absorbing light, eyes fixed and calculating. It moved with the terrible grace of something that had never known doubt. The Council's predictive engine simulated outcomes in cascading probability trees. Survival estimates for the human collapsed toward zero. Instead of fleeing, the human smiled. Kelt felt a flicker of confusion ripple through the chamber. The human's posture softened, shoulders lowering, breath steady. The predator closed the remaining distance and leapt. Several observers turned away. Kelt forced himself to watch. The creature landed on the human's chest and pressed its head beneath the human's chin. A low vibration filled the audio channel, rhythmic and resonant. The human laughed, a sound the archives defined as joy, and wrapped both arms around the predator without hesitation. "Reassess," Kelt whispered. The system complied, then hesitated. Aggression markers were absent. Stress hormones in the human dropped. The predator's vitals suggested contentment. Kelt's crest flushed in disbelief. The being designed to hunt had chosen restraint. The Council demanded context. Feeds multiplied. Other humans appeared across Earth, each sharing space with similar predators. Some were large, some small, all perfectly equipped to kill. None were restrained. Humans spoke to them softly, touched vulnerable areas, trusted them near their offspring. Kelt studied a human designated Mara, a maintenance engineer on an orbital station. She shared her sleeping quarters with a striped predator curled against her spine. When an alarm sounded, Mara woke instantly, reaching not for a weapon but for the creature. It rose, alert, placing itself between her and the hatch. No command was spoken. None was needed. How is compliance achieved? A counselor demanded. "It is not," the system replied. "Behavior indicates voluntary association." That answer unsettled Kelt more than violence would have. He ordered historical data. The archives showed humans rescuing injured predators, feeding them during scarcity, allowing them to leave. Many did. Many returned. Patterns emerged of loyalty without coercion. Another feed showed Mara days earlier, kneeling in a corridor as the same predator hissed at a malfunctioning drone. It struck only after Mara was threatened. Afterwards, she pressed her forehead to its fur, trembling. The predator licked her face once and settled beside her. Kelt realized then that the central conflict was not between humans and predators, but between the galaxy's assumptions and reality. Humans did not dominate these creatures. They offered safety, patience, and choice. The chamber grew quiet again, but now the silence carried weight. Kelt closed the feed on the human dwelling, where it had begun. The predator slept, trusting, its claws sheathed against fragile skin. "Record this," Kelt said softly. "Any species that earns the loyalty of killers without chains must be understood before it is challenged." Far away on Earth, the human stirred, smiled in her sleep, and the predator adjusted to keep her warm. Kelt did not sleep after the session ended. He replayed the images, focusing on small details. The exposed throat, the unguarded eyes, the ease with which trust replaced fear. In Council doctrine, predators were variables to be eliminated. On Earth, they were partners. The implications unsettled him. If humans could build such bonds with creatures evolved for violence, what might they accomplish when faced with an enemy that underestimated empathy as weakness? The Council would debate classifications and threat levels, but Kelt sensed the truth already forming. Humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or numbers. It was their willingness to open themselves to danger and answer with care. Somewhere beyond the chamber, fleets would be moving, decisions would be made, and tests would come. As Kelt finally dimmed the lights, one certainty remained. The galaxy had just misunderstood humans, and that misunderstanding was about to become very costly. The predators slept beside their humans, unaware they had become the first proof that compassion, freely given, could turn fear itself into an unbreakable alliance across the stars, watching silently in awe. The Council's decision came quietly, which frightened Kelt more than outrage ever could. Humanity would not be contacted, not warned. Instead, a controlled test was approved. A single external threat, limited in scope, would probe whether the bond humans formed with predators was coincidence or capability. The Carrick's Dominion volunteered. Mara learned of the approaching fleet, not through alarms, but through her cat. Ash stiffened in her arms, ears flattening as station sensors hummed awake. Mara trusted that reaction more than any screen. She sealed her suit, heart steady, and whispered reassurance she barely felt. Ash pressed his forehead to her visor, a promise made without language. Across Earth and its orbitals, the pattern repeated. Cats became vigilant, occupying doorways, windows, corridors. Humans noticed. They adapted. Kelt watched the feeds, disturbed by the absence of panic. Instead, there was preparation, quiet and communal, as if an unspoken agreement had been activated. The Carricks arrived with doctrine and certainty. Their broadcast announced cleansing. Predators would be neutralized. Humans would be spared or compliant. Kelt saw Mara hear the message and laugh once, sharp and tired. She knelt to Ash's level and met his eyes. "Stay close," she said. He did not move away. When the first landers touched down, the Carricks deployed sonic fear arrays. Every known predator species broke and scattered under such assault. On Earth, birds fled and dogs whimpered. Cats didn't either. They watched, muscles coiled, pupils narrow. The data contradicted every model Kelt had ever trusted. A Carrick's patrol entered the station's lower ring. Their armor was heavy, their confidence absolute. Ash slipped from Mara's arms and vanished into maintenance shadows. Kelt's analyst predicted loss of the asset. Mara's breathing slowed instead. She advanced behind patrol, counting steps, trusting timing. The first Carricks fell without a sound. A scream followed, then confusion. Ash reappeared only long enough to redirect fire, then disappeared again. Systems failed. Doors sealed. Lights died. Mara moved with purpose, not rage, following the spaces Ash created. When she reached the last corridor, she found him standing between her and the enemy commander, fur bristling, body small and immovable. The commander aimed at Mara. Ash struck the exposed joint, not to kill but to cripple. The shot went wide. Silence returned, heavy and complete. The commander dropped, stunned and breathing, alive because Ash chose restraint. Elsewhere, similar choices unfolded. Cats did not slaughter indiscriminately. They protected. They guided. Humans followed, learned, survived. Kelt understood then that this was not symbiosis born of convenience. It was ethics expressed through instinct. The Carrot's command signal fractured into pleas. Their doctrine could not process predators that fought for others without domination. They retreated to consolidate. The test, meant to be limited, had revealed more than the Council anticipated. Mara sat against the bulkhead afterward, hands shaking at last. Ash climbed into her lap, kneading gently, grounding her. She pressed her forehead to his and breathed. Kelt watched, crest dim, certainty eroding. The galaxy had sought proof of weakness. Instead, it uncovered a bond that rewrote power itself. As the Carricks withdrew to regroup, Kelt logged a private note. A breach of protocol he accepted willingly. Any force that returned would face not just humans, but their chosen guardians. The conflict had begun, and it would not be decided by weapons alone. Kelt remained at his station long after formal reports ended, reviewing footage frame by frame. He studied Mara's restraint, the way fear surfaced only after safety returned, and Ash's precision never excessive, never cruel. This was not chaos masquerading as courage. It was discipline born from care. The Council's models failed because they ignored choice. Humans invited risk, and predators answered with loyalty. That truth unsettled him. If challenged again, humans would adapt faster, trust deeper, and refuse surrender. The Carracks would return with greater force, believing escalation ensured victory. Kelt suspected the opposite. Bonds strengthened under threat. He authorized deeper observation, aware history was accelerating. Somewhere between stars, fleets were aligning, doctrines hardening and assumptions calcifying. On Earth, a woman and her cat rested together. Unaware they had become a case study in the future of war. Kelt closed the file with a final note for himself alone. Never mistake gentleness for weakness, and never underestimate a species willing to protect what it loves. He wondered how many civilizations had fallen because they mistook control for safety. The answer was likely all of them. With a measured breath, Kelt prepared the council for a longer conflict, one fought across values as much as battlefields. The next encounter would be decisive, not because of scale, but because of understanding gained and denied. He felt certainty settle, heavy, and irreversible, as observation gave way to responsibility at last. For the galaxy watching in silence. The retreat of the Carracks did not bring peace, only a deeper, more dangerous quiet. Kelt stood before the council as the final report streamed in, his voice steady, while unease coiled beneath his composure. Humanity had survived the test, but survival was no longer questioned. The galaxy now faced a species that transformed threat into alliance, fear into resolve. To ignore that lesson would invite catastrophe. Mara recovered slowly, exhaustion setting into her bones once the adrenaline faded. Ash rarely left her side, sleeping lightly, alert even in rest. She noticed how he watched corridors, how his presence calmed others without effort. Crew members spoke to him softly, offering food, gratitude, space. No one commanded him. That, more than anything, reminded her why they had endured. Trust could not be ordered. It had to be earned again and again. The Carracks regrouped beyond sensor range, their leaders divided. Some argued for annihilation, others for withdrawal. None could explain predators that chose mercy or humans who accepted vulnerability as strategy. Their doctrine cracked under evidence. They prepared a second advance anyway, believing greater force would erase doubt. Kelt saw the pattern clearly and felt a rare pull toward intervention. Against protocol, the Council authorized limited contact. A transmission reached Earth, encoded carefully, stripped of threat. Kelt spoke not as judge but witness. He acknowledged the bond, the restraint, the choice. He warned of escalation and misunderstanding. He asked, simply, how humans intended to proceed. Mara listened to the message in a crowded ward, ash curled against her ribs. She felt fear, yes, but also clarity. Humanity had never thrived by closing its hands. She responded without bravado. Humans would defend themselves. They would not surrender their companions. They would offer coexistence where possible and resistance where necessary. She made no promises beyond that. Kelt replayed her words, struck by their balance. Not dominance, not submission, responsibility. The second Carracks incursion began with greater firepower and less certainty. Cats met it with the same discipline as before, not as weapons, but as guardians. Humans adapted faster, coordinating around living allies who anticipated danger before sensors could. Losses came and grief followed, but bonds held. Each act of protection tightened them. When the decisive moment arrived, it was quiet. A Carrack's flagship drifted disabled, its systems compromised without catastrophic loss of life. A ceasefire signal pulsed outward. Kelt authorized acceptance. Negotiations opened, tense and fragile. The Carracks conceded withdrawal and pledged reform under observation. They did not admit defeat. They admitted ignorance. Afterward, classifications changed. Humanity was no longer cataloged by conflict history alone. A new designation emphasized relational intelligence, adaptive empathy, voluntary alliance. It unsettled many, but it fit. On Earth, recovery continued. Memorials appeared, modest and sincere. Cats slept in sunlit windows, walked among humans without fear, and chose where it belonged. Mara returned to work, carrying scars she accepted without regret. Ash resumed his routines, indifferent to titles, attentive to her heartbeat. Kelt filed his final report, and added a personal coda, sealed and unsigned. Power, he wrote, was not the capacity to control, but the courage to share risk. Species that learned this would endure. Those that did not would repeat their failures, until none remained to record them. The council adjourned. Fleet stood down. Observation gave way to dialogue, cautious but real. Across the stars, the story spread, reshaping assumptions that had calcified for millennia. Morrow watched Ash stretch in the evening light, and felt something like hope settle into place. The galaxy would test him again. It always did. But now there was proof that compassion could survive contact with fear, and that survival need not erase gentleness. As night fell, Ash chose her lap, and she chose to trust the future a little more than yesterday.